Kia ora te whānau a iho karaiti. Ko Andrew Tapudea ho. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 10th of July, and it's Luke chapter 10 verses 25 through to 37. A lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbour as yourself." But he said to him, "You've given the right answer. Do this and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbour?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while travelling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back I will repay you whatever you spend." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." I'm surprised from time to time by discovering new things as I'm considering a passage which is familiar and which I may have spoken on many times before. This is one. And I can't help reflecting that it's because as we learn new things in other areas, they reshape the way we understand what often has been familiar and we've seen through a particular lens and been enabled to see it in a new and in a fresh way. Such is the case for me with this particular text. We see a lawyer who, as I see it, has a really good handle on the heart of the Jewish law. When asked what he sees to be the issues, what he sees the law to say, what is required of him, he says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbour as yourself. Now, interestingly, these 2 statements, loving God and loving your neighbour, are quite separate within the Torah. The first one, loving God, is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And loving your neighbour is found in Leviticus chapter 19. And as you're reading through the section in Leviticus 19, it would be easy to miss it because it's kind of buried in the middle of a whole lot of other stuff. Yet he's identified it, and I imagine he's not the only one that somehow picked up that when you put these 2 together, they embrace the whole of the Jewish law. And Jesus testifies to this, that everything is found, and the very core of it is found in these 2 commandments. So he understands them. And yet, it says that he's wanting to justify himself. There's something that's going on here that we're not aware of. And so he asks the question, who is my neighbour? It literally means someone close by, someone near. And maybe he has in mind, we can't know for sure, a relationship, or a series of relationships that are fractured. And that he wished to be vindicated in some way, that he didn't need to worry about it because these people weren't really his neighbours. And perhaps not being held responsible for bringing forward some kind of restoration. But Jesus tells the story. And at the end, when he asks the question, he said, it literally reads, "Which one do you think was becoming a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" Now what he's saying really, in a sense, is that being a neighbour is not necessarily just an issue of physical location. It's an issue of relationship. It's an issue of connectedness. It's an issue of action and behaviour. Who's becoming a neighbour to this man who fell into the hands of robbers? Being a neighbour is a process, something that we did, not just a state, but one which requires an engagement and an action. Now, what we discover is that fellow Jews who should have cared for this man didn't. You to think of all the people who should have known, they would have known better. The first one is going down is a Levite. The first was a priest. I'm just checking. First is a priest. He's on his way down to Jericho. He's going down the Jericho road. So he's going away from Jerusalem. And so is the Levite. Now, priests and Levites are kind of related because the priests come out of the tribe of Levi. But each of the tribe of Levi too, in their own way, had responsibilities when their turn came at the temple. So these were the holy people. These were the set apart ones who should have been good representatives of the God of Israel. Now, I used to think that perhaps that they were going on their way up to the temple, but it's very clear that they were going down. So if they had done their religious duty, they were perhaps on their way home again. Because one of the things that you'd think with a priest, and perhaps with a Levi, was that they'd be worried about being made ceremonially unclean by touching someone who might die. And then they would not be able to perform their religious duties. But clearly, even here, they're going in the wrong direction. So that's an excuse that doesn't wash for them. But they're looking, they're noticing, and perhaps the first one just pretends that he hasn't seen. The Levite, you get the sense that he looks, changes his mind, and carries on. They've both noticed this man in his distress, in his need, in his dire circumstances, and they choose to turn away. Jesus is appealing simply to their humanity, to their decency as human beings. It's interesting the way that we read by chance and then and likewise. First for the priest, by chance a priest happens to come past. Likewise, a Levite. I've concluded, this is one of my learnings over the last couple of years, I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe in chance in that way anymore. I don't necessarily believe in fate either, but I do believe in a sense of divine invitations. And as these two men are passing, as they are approaching this man this fellow countryman who's been beaten up by robbers, there's an invitation that's being offered to them to do something. They harden their hearts and just carry on by. There's a sense that the invitation is offered and they pass it up, they turn it and just carry on their way. And then we see this Samaritan. Now, the Samaritans and the Jews hated one another. I suggest the Jews hated the Samaritans out of a deep sense of shame because they are related. And the Samaritans hated the Jews because of the Jewish superiority, but also from the appalling way that in the previous 100 or so years they've been treated by the Jewish people. They had lots of reason to feel a deep antipathy, a deep hatred towards the Jewish people. And it's this Samaritan as he's passing by. We're not told which direction he's going in. But he sees this man half dead, beaten and bleeding at the side of the road. And it says he has pity on him. The word that's used there in the Greek is splanchnesomai. It is used rarely in the New Testament. It is used to describe the compassion of God, and it's used by Jesus in a number of his parables also to describe that kind of compassion that is generated by God. In the Old King James Version, it would have read something like the bowels of mercy. And it literally means his insides turned over inside him. There's a sense of this real profound sense of compassion and pity. And he just knows he has to do something. And he does. His heart, the heart of this hated Samaritan, recognizes the need of the moment. And he extends himself in generosity. He extends himself in love. He extends himself in compassion and kindness to a person whom under normal circumstances they would have regarded one another as enemies. This is the heart of the neighbour. And the passage is inviting us to notice that compassion, to notice that being a neighbour is something that isn't exclusive to a people who are like us. It's an invitation to all of us when we see someone in need that we have the capacity to do something about and to respond to that. The two people who should have done something did nothing. They pretended they hadn't seen, passed by on the other side. They noticed all right, but they said no to God's invitation. This hated Samaritan, who was not part of the covenant people, saw the need. The Spirit of God nudged his heart just the same. And he responded out of grace. He responded out of generosity. He responded out of love. He responded at some significant cost to himself. A denarii doesn't sound like much, but a denarii is actually a labourer's wages for the day, a day's wages. So he'd actually handed two across, and he says, if he spends more, to the innkeeper, I'll repay you when I come by next time. And he's trusting. He's trusting that the innkeeper is going to be honest with him. But he's committed in an act of generosity and love to making a difference. Jesus, in a sense, doesn't let any of us off the hook, does he? God bless you.